We're a room full of people with different stories, and your story is not the same. The way you have seen God at work is not the same as the person sitting beside you. Want to remember together what God has done in 2025. And this past year may have been an amazing year for you, or it may have been a really terrible year. Part of recognizing what God has done is wading through the good and the bad, searching for Jesus' fingerprint in the middle of it all. Each of you at this point in time are likely thinking one of three things. Thing one, please don't ask me. Please don't ask me. I don't want to share anything. Thing two is you're ready. You've got all the stories. When you think about God at work, you're like, yeah, I could share any of 35 stories. I'm ready to go. And then there's a third group of you. You're still like, I don't know what this means. I don't even know how to start thinking about this story of God at work. In answer to those three things, those questions, I'm not going to call you out, so you can breathe a sigh of relief. Two, you're going to have to wait a few more minutes before you share. We're going to break up into some smaller groups in a little bit, and you can share those stories if you'd like of where you've seen God at work. I'm not going to pressure you to. Third, we're going to talk about what it means to discern these God stories. You may be wondering what your five senses have to do with hearing God, seeing God at work. We can see God at work by remembering our senses. Sense of sight. You likely are not going to look out your living room window this afternoon and see God lifting a car off of a cat that got squished underneath that car. When it comes to sight, have you seen somebody experience healing? Have you seen somebody experience newness in their life? Or have you seen something happen that causes you to be still and know that God is present? Something like the snowstorm from last night. Hearing. Most people don't hear the audible voice of God. God does speak audibly to some people. That is not the case for a lot of people. But in times of stillness, have you heard the voice of God whisper? I've got this. As Pat said, get out of my way, Pat. Smell. Again, you're likely not going to smell God no matter how much you try. Growing up, I grew up on a farm. We had a really large yard, and part of my job was cutting grass. To this day, every time I cut grass, and I know it's not the right season for grass cutting right now, but every time I get a smell of freshly cut grass, I'm reminded of the goodness of God in creation. The fact that God created the heavens and the earth from something as simple as the smell of grass. Touch. You are unable to go outside and physically touch God. That is not how God works. But we're surrounded by all sorts of things in the world. Some of them are naturally occurring, like snow. You can go outside and make a snowball when you leave here. Other things are made by humans, like a bike or your house. The next time you find yourself holding something, stop and ponder what it means for God to give you that experience. Taste. Again, you can't taste God. Grabbing a mouthful of snow, taking a bite out of a tree, does not mean that you're tasting God. I have a bad habit of devouring food without tasting it. Any of you have that same habit? Yeah? Next time you eat, ponder. Think about the food that God has given you. Psalm 34 verse 8 says, "Taste and see that the Lord is good." The word of the Lord can be chewed on, ruminated on. Those words of God can form and shape you. So where have you seen God? It can be a very ambiguous question. But if you ponder that question from the perspective of your senses, maybe it becomes a little bit less ambiguous and a little bit more practical. Or another way to think of this question is through the themes of Advent. Traditionally, there are 4 themes that pair with the 4 Sundays leading up to Christmas: hope, peace, joy, and love. Where have you seen God? Or in other words, where have you experienced hope in the midst of a seemingly hopeless situation? Our world is filled with chaos. I think we can all agree to that. But is there a place that you have seen a glimmer of peace shining through the chaos? Think of a time that you were filled with joy. You're sitting there, you had that big goofy grin on your face, and you just couldn't stop. Or think of a time in the last year that you were loved. That somebody gave you a hug. Somebody gave you a gift. Somebody said something kind to you. Often when we experience hope and peace and joy and love, it is God showing up. But often we don't even notice. Often we miss those opportunities to see God at work completely. As last Sunday of the month, it's our interactive worship Sunday. Now, for those of you that have been here for an interactive worship Sunday, you know what it looks like, sort of. It's going to be a little bit different than the past, but still relatively similar. I'm going to pray here shortly, and after I pray, I'm going to invite you to break into groups of 3 or 4. Share a story of where you have seen God at work in the last year. You've got 5 minutes. Okay, so we're not looking for all the details. For those of you that can tell a really long story, shorten it, okay? Like a minute. I'm going to tell you the same thing I told the people who I asked to put the video together, like 1-minute stories. So you're going to have groups of 3 or 4. You have 5 minutes to share a story of where you've seen God at work. Ponder your senses. Ponder those Advent themes. Hope and peace and joy and love. Hopefully you can come up with at least one story of where you've seen God at work over the last year. Stories don't need to be fancy. They don't need to be complicated. But they're your story of God showing up. And let's celebrate that together. God, awaken our imaginations. Teach us to see glimpses of your kingdom in everyday images. Help us to tell stories that point people to you. Amen. 5 minutes begins now. Break up into your groups.